interested. Thank you so much. Oh boy. I told her she's making me laugh, she's making me cry. What else is there? My goodness, that's on there tight. There we go. Just you wait. Well, thank you. Thank you for that welcome. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As usual, it is my pleasure to be here and to share with you this morning. So I want to start off by asking you a question. If you get on a plane and somebody gets on after you and has a turban on, how do you feel? What do you think? Does anything come up? Good, I'm great. There we go. It's not always the response of everybody. So here is two people with a turban. They actually were at my ordination. This is my brother and his wife. And they are Sikhs. And I have to say that my brother is probably one of the sweetest men that you'll ever meet. Now, we didn't always think that way about each other, but we do now. And I love his wife dearly. But what I know is that he stands about this tall and he can impose fear in some people because he does wear a turban. He often looks like this when he goes out. So today I'm going to share some things with you about the Sikh tradition. But before I do that, I want to speak to what we heard last week, which was Reverend Daiho Hilbert, who talked to us from the Zen Buddhist perspective. He talked about the fact that the light that we're seeking when we seek enlightenment is already within us. And that it's through sitting on the cushion, through doing our meditation and our spiritual work, that we clear whatever's blocking our light from shining out in the world and taking that enlightenment out into the world. He talked about sitting on the cushion and then getting off the cushion and going out there. And so what I know from observing the Sikhs over the many years that my brother has been practicing and involved in this community is that the Sikhs also do that. They sit, they meditate, and then they take their spirituality and their light out in the world in a way that is just amazing to watch. They are great examples of light in service to the world. But before I talk about what the Sikhs believe, I want to back up a little bit and give you some history about the Sikh tradition. Now, as with every history, you could spend years studying it. This is a history that goes many hundreds of years back. So what I'm sharing with you is a very brief overview. So first of all, the Sikhs originated in India. And so to fully understand the Sikh tradition, you need to understand the history of India. And within that history, then, is the development of Hinduism, also the caste system in terms of how the social structure was structured and still has some flavors of it left today. Also the influence of Buddhism and Jainism, both which opposed the caste system along with the Sikhs that opposed the caste system. And the tensions that arrived from that. Then enter the British Crown, about 1585, founding the East India Company in September 24th, 1599. So by the 19th century, India was ruled by Britain. Now the Sikhs began in 1469. It was founded by Guru Nanak in the Punjab area of India. And so one of the authors that I read, it's a book about the Sikhs here by Patwant Singh, and he talks in here about his perception as to how the Brits were able to come in and take over was largely based on the disruption that was taking place in society due to these different influences and disagreements around how the society should be structured and the different belief systems. So the Crown took over in 1858. So in this period of time then, from when it was founded, the Sikhs in 1469, till around March 30th of 1630, the 10th guru then his name was Gobind Singh. He baptized 5 Sikhs from different social backgrounds to form the Brotherhood of Khalsa. And Khalsa means the pure one. Now, all the Sikhs today have the last name Khalsa. So if you see that, you know the person is a Sikh. But these were the first 5 Sikhs, is how they're referred to. So it's important to kind of know a little bit, just that little bit of background, to realize that it was against this backdrop of the caste system and what was happening in India that the Sikh tradition continued to grow and develop. And like a lot of religions, unfortunately, in that history are wars and times when they're fighting to defend their beliefs and their right to have their beliefs. But throughout it all is a tradition and a way of believing that I think you will find very interesting in terms of how related or how similar it is to what we also teach here. So, first of all, the cornerstone or the very basis of the Sikh tradition starts with the number 1. It is the first character in the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the Sikh scripture, and it is the cornerstone of the Sikh tradition. 1 points to the oneness of the world, the connectedness of reality, and the intermingling of the Creator with its creation. Behind this logic, this idea of oneness, then, is the concept that divinity connects all that exists. The Sikhs' view is that divinity is in and through all things. And the example they gave in here is think of the fact that there are atoms in everything that we know of, and think of the divine within every single atom. That's the way they perceive the divine, in and through all things. So from that belief, then, it's pretty clear that there can't be a caste system, and that's part of why they didn't approve of the caste system, because they saw God, the divine, in and through all people, all things. And so they had this idea that in God all are equal, or what they refer to as the Sikh principle of absolute equality. I like that term, absolute equality. And so one of the things that this author in the history book points out is he says, any faith that believes in equality among human beings and sees God in each of them is an intrusion, an assault on those who constitute the caste hierarchy. Such intruders have to be removed, as was Buddhism. The Sikhs and their belief, which threatened the Brahmin supremacy by rejecting the idea of caste, also fell into this category. So that's why, like I said, there were also some tumultuous times in their history. But the idea was that their seeing equality or oneness in all disrupted that caste system. Now, their absolute equality also included women, all the way back to Guru Nanak in the 1400s. And this is, again, in a culture where women would throw themselves on the pyre of their husband if he had died, where he was being cremated, because they felt that they were worth nothing once he was gone. And the Sikhs were teaching that women were equal, that they were as valuable as men. And so Yogi Bhajan said, I believe that so long as those born of woman do not respect women, there shall be no peace on earth. So who was the Yogi Bhajan? Well, he is the Sikh who brought the Sikh tradition over here to the United States. And then in 1969, he arrived in Los Angeles, and he saw the drug culture and what was going on there, and he began teaching yoga, Kundalini yoga, and the vegetarian alternative lifestyle to drugs, and helping them to see a deeper truth within themselves. And he created a foundation called 3HO, and the 3 H's stand for happy, healthy, and holy. And that foundation is called the 3HO organization, or 3 Happy, Healthy, Holy organization. So if you've had yogi tea, if you've eaten Khalsa cereal, these are things that have come out of that organization. And so he was teaching them how they can create a life for themselves outside of the drug culture. And what I've been told is that in that process, they started to get interested in who he was, what made him tick. They wanted more than yoga. They wanted more than a vegetarian meal or a vegetarian way of life. They wanted to understand the spirituality behind what he was teaching and why he was teaching it. And so he began teaching them about the Sikh tradition. And that's how that movement began here in the United States. And again, he was teaching these same principles. One God, that one God in and through all things and all people, and absolute equality. And so we already heard both of the readings that Lillian did this morning were Ernest Holmes' words. Ernest Holmes was teaching oneness, God in and through all things. And we have more things in common with the Sikhs, too, that as I kept reading and searching, I realized why my brother and I get along so well now. Last month, we were looking at gratitude and the importance of gratitude in our lives. And this is a book written by another Sikh, Kundalini Yoga, The Flow of Eternal Power, an easy guide to the yoga of awareness as taught by the Yogi Bhajan. And this is by Shakti Parwakar Khalsa. And in here, she tells a story about what happened one day when she got really cold and decided to make herself a cup of tea. Now, the Sikhs will take their shoes off when they go into their places of worship as well as when they go into their homes. And she said her feet were getting cold, so she went to get on a pair of socks, put the tea on the floor, and when she came back, she forgot that she'd put this tea on the floor and stepped in it with her sock, and it was boiling hot, so it burned her foot because it got into the sock as well. So she said she called the Yogi Bhajan thinking she would get sympathy from him, and instead he said, "I'll send someone over to take care of it." And the woman that came over settled her down, got her comfortable. She said she was afraid that she wouldn't sleep during the night, but she did. She slept very well. And in the morning, her skin was perfectly fine. It was clear. It didn't hurt. So she was really excited about this and called her mother. "Mom, guess what happened?" Told her what happened, how she'd stepped in the tea, and how she woke up and it was fine. And she said, "I just can't believe it." Well, then she called 4 other friends, told them the same story. "I just can't believe it." And she said by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, her foot didn't believe it anymore either. It began to be red again, swollen and hurting. She said she had to spend 2 weeks then letting it heal through nature doing its thing. And so from that, she said she learned the power of her words and her thoughts in regard to the healing process and how that can work in our lives. So this idea of the words healing and our thoughts having an impact and being important is part of the Sikh tradition as well. So later she talks about how she fell and hurt herself, and now at this point she had been teaching these traditions and teaching about Sikh tradition. So she said, "I decided to try some of the yogic technology." And she said whenever her back started to hurt from the fall, she would say out loud or think to herself, "Thank you, God. I accept your wonderful gift of pain." And as she said that, the pain would dissipate. And so she again started to see how her thoughts could work toward healing. And she concludes both of these stories with gratefully accepting everything that comes to us as a gift of God invokes a remarkably dynamic response from God. An attitude of gratitude invites and allows the power of God to work faster and easier to bless and heal us. So part of how the Sikhs then use this idea of having positive thinking and positive thoughts is when they want to shift out of negative thinking or they want to keep their thinking there, they use mantras. They use ways of keeping their mind shifted into a positive place. And I just about jumped up in the middle of our song, Silence and Prayer, because Mary Lynn, this is my confirmation that we are always tuned in and that what we are speaking about is what it needs to be. She picked the word truth as the second one that we sang. And the mantra that I was going to share with you, one of their main mantras that they call their seed words, are Satnam. And that means truth, name. Satnam. And they use this as a mantra to settle themselves into the remembering the truth of who they are. So Satnam has a variety of different ways it can be translated into English. I am truth. Truth is my essence. Truth is your identity. God's name is truth. Now notice the subject here. I, your, and God are all interchangeable. That idea of oneness, Satnam. And they use this as a greeting. They say hello with Satnam, and they use it as a salutation when they're parting, Satnam. So it's a lot like we have sometimes used here, namaste, that idea. But what they're saying is that they see the truth in you, and they recognize the truth in themselves. And I thought it was fun how she put it. She says, by saying Satnam to each other, we acknowledge the highest consciousness in each of us. For that moment, we are relating as soul to soul, and we are truly one in spirit. And then she adds in parentheses, then we go on and agree or disagree about anything we want. So I thought that was perfect. You begin with acknowledging your oneness, Satnam. And then they also use that as a way of meditating, breathing in on Sat, breathing out on Nam. Sat, Nam. So if you are any place, you can do that in your mind or out loud to remind yourself of your truth, that you are truth expressing. Well, I was also invited to speak at the Unity service this morning, and since I already had a quote from Ernest Holmes, I sought one from Charles Fillmore, and I found in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary that he said, the true church is not made of creeds and forms, nor is it contained in walls of wood or stone. The heart of man is its temple, and the spirit of truth is the one guide into all truth. So again, within the New Thought teaching is this idea is that truth is in us, that we are one with the truth. So there are a lot of ways, as I kept reading, there's more, obviously a lot more depth to the Sikh teaching, but I wanted to share one other principle with you today, and this is the one I wanted to focus on, and that's the tradition of Seva, service. Selfless service is one of the translations for the word Seva, and why the Sikhs serve, and what we can learn from them in regard to service or Seva. So I wanted to note again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm doing it on purpose, that Seva is rooted in the principle of oneness, interconnectedness, and the idea of equality, because we have this same teaching. And so it was very fascinating to me to see how the Sikhs embody that teaching and take it out into the world as Seva. And that's a very prominent part of who they are in this tradition. So what does Seva exactly mean? It's service, selfless service, or service with an intention. And sometimes it's referred to as justice or social justice work as well. It depends on what they're doing. The article that I found that helped me address this is called Why Sikhs Serve, the Tradition of Seva as Justice Inspired by Love. And in this, they explain where this idea of Seva comes from. And so, again, I want to emphasize the importance of where it's coming from. They talk about the intention and the importance of that intention. So here, sorry. This morning in Unity, I was able to get pictures up there, and I don't know how to do that for us, but this is the picture, if you can see it, of a Sikh person providing water. And this is Rohingya refugees escaping violent persecution and crossing the border from Myanmar into Bangladesh are being met by Sikh volunteers, providing free food, water, and shelter. So are Syrian and Iraqi refugees, many of whom are abandoning war-torn countries by foot and encountering free bakeries set up and operated by Sikhs. Despite the fact that they are a small percentage of the global populations, Sikhs continue to serve at the forefront of humanitarian causes, from hurricanes and tsunamis to floods and terrorist attacks. The Sikhs put themselves out there to be of service in whatever way. And so why is this? Their altruism comes from this belief in this practice of Seva. It's justice work that's at the core of their very traditions. And they talk about here the importance then of that intention that is behind Seva, the intention that goes into it. So it's not just running around saying, what do I need to do? It's really coming from that place of love and connection. The goal of the Sikh life is to go beyond an egocentric way of seeing the world and to realize that oneness out in the world. And by doing so, they seek to live with love through a daily practice, experiencing love and oneness within one's life. Service, then, for the Sikhs becomes a way to express love. Service is prayerful action, and service is worship manifest. So he talks then about the difference between activism, as we might think about it, and how a Sikh thinks about it. Activism is about the action itself, whereas Seva takes into account the motivation as well as the action. And in the Sikh tradition, it's not the action alone that constitutes Seva, it's the intention behind it that's important. True service, then, is motivated from love. So again, it's something that I felt like I needed to think about in some ways too, because there's a difference between sitting, getting centered in love, and then acting and moving forward in how we are inspired to be moved. My brother has also written several books, and this one is called Divine Relationships, Two Bodies, One Soul, and it's by him and his wife, Namkar Khalsa and Siriatma Singh Khalsa. And in the very front, in the introduction, he talks about what relationships are. Now, in this book, they're talking about a relationship between partners, but I think this applies to any relationship. He says, a relationship is an exchange between one or more objects. A divine relationship, then, is a divine exchange between two people. And it is formed in my thoughts, and more importantly, my intention. There can be no merger without a purity of intention. Purity of intention involves service. So here's that connection again of our intention and service. It involves service, authenticity, and the joy of belonging or merging into something greater than the individual self. Service doesn't mean running around doing things for others. It means allowing others to take what they need from you. Service stands at the base of a divine relationship. Your fulfillment comes from enjoying the purity of your own intent, the peace that occurs when someone finds their completion in your presence. I thought that was beautiful. Think about that. The peace that comes from someone finding their completion in your presence. As you serve in this way, you become one with yourself and your partner. You merge into a divine grace. Satnam, Siriatma Singh. So as we think about then, how do we move into a space of Seva? I again looked at Charles Fillmore and I saw that he wrote in the 12 Powers of Man, right here and right now, the great work of character building is to be done. And whoever neglects the present opportunities, looking forward to a future in heaven for better conditions, is pulling right away from the kingdom of heaven within him or herself. So what he's saying there is if we have opportunities in front of us to serve, opportunities where we can bring our light, and we decide we're just going to hold out for heaven to see everything get better, we're not realizing the heaven that we have within us and that potential. And so Seva is taking up those present opportunities. It's meeting them in whatever way we feel called, again, rooted in the idea of oneness and love. Those are the intentions, allowing the other to find completion in our presence. So one of the questions then is, do we lose ourself? What about taking care of ourself? And he addresses that in this article as well. And he talks again about the turban situation. So since the idea of terrorist has been attached to people wearing turbans, that's one of the beliefs out there, the Sikhs have received some backlash as well because people can't tell the difference. And so one of the things he says in this article is it could be very easy for the Sikhs to go, oh, that's not us, that's them. It's those Muslims over there. Take all your hate and your prejudice and pile it on them. But that's not what the Sikhs have chosen to do. All around the world, the Sikhs recognize the Muslims as their brothers and sisters. So they've chosen to stand by them, even as it might endanger their own life, because they believe in Seva, being of service in that way, rooted in oneness and love and that connection and that oneness of all people. So I thought that was interesting that they actually pointed that out. And as we think about how it is then that we can bring Seva out into the world. In the Science of Mind magazine, let me find it, from November, the very back of the magazine at the very end is an article about Spirit in Action, taking yoga into the prisons. And in here, the author says that he had a critic say to him, "Why are you bringing the luxury of yoga into the prisons?" Yeah. And his response was, "But it's not a luxury, it's essential. Self-compassion leads to the empathy necessary for living with others." So as we teach people how to gain self-compassion, whether it's through yoga or meditation or through teachings like this or whatever the teaching is, as we're teaching self-compassion and self-care, we're improving how they then can relate and interact with other people out in the world. And likewise, as we work on our own self-compassion and self-care. And so they talk about that also in this article, the importance of self-care, because if we're all one, as I take care of me, I'm taking care of you. As I take care of you, I'm taking care of me. And that is part of this idea of oneness. So another Sikh quote, this comes again from Guru Nanak, the first teacher. "He who has no faith in himself can never have faith in God. He who has no faith in himself can never have faith in God." Again, there's that oneness, God, myself, you. So working on our own spiritual growth, our own faith in ourselves, taking care of ourselves. The idea for the Sikhs is Seva joins spirituality with justice and cultivating your personal spirituality while also going out there and serving the larger community in whatever way you feel called. Again, rooted in love and in that interconnectedness. So one of the things the Sikhs pointed out in this article as well is that they don't think they've got the corner on this market. They know that all of us can practice Seva. And they, like us, don't proselytize. They believe that they go out and do service, and if people want what they have, they will be drawn to them. And that's what we also believe. And so I was thinking then in terms of how do we practice Seva? What can we do at this time of year as we're thinking about gift giving and all the different ways that we can give? How can we give that gift of Seva? Service with intention, rooted in love, and in our interconnectedness. Service without ego was another way they talked about it. I thought about in my family sometimes we've made coupons for each other. And the coupon would be, this is for me, I'll bring you breakfast in bed, or I'll walk the dog for you, or do whatever your other chore is. To me, those are, Seva can be small and it can be big. But those gifts of service can be given in some way like that, where we are willing to take on a job for someone so they can have some peace or some rest. I know when my son was little, his grandparents didn't want any more stuff. So instead of stuff, they would give us a list, and when we go visit them, my son would join us as we would do things like hammer nails on the porch that had popped up, or paint extra things, trim back the bushes. So again, a gift of service in some way as opposed to stuff or things. And currently, my stepmother and father don't want stuff, and they don't want to give stuff. So what they've chosen to do is on Giving Tuesday, they give to charities in our name, for different ones for each of us that they know that we would support. And on Giving Tuesday, then their money is doubled or tripled by other givers. And so they see that as a more effective way of giving than giving us stuff. So those are just some ideas. And then I was thinking in terms of sort of spiritual and emotional ways that we can give of service. So think back in your own life. Did you have someone in your life that believed in you at some point when you maybe didn't believe in yourself? Have you had someone who's helped mentor you in any area of your life, or helped you through a rough time? Maybe helped you overcome some bad decision you made and sat with you through that until you came out the other side? Someone who just sat with you maybe prayerfully and just let you be during a difficult time. Those are gifts that you probably remember more than all the things you've unwrapped over the years. And those are the kinds of gifts you can pay forward. You can find ways to mentor someone, spend time with them, listen, be supportive, encouraging, sit in prayer, be an example. We can also give the gift of forgiveness, whether it's of a debt or of a behavior. And we can tell the truth, as we say in our community commitment, lovingly, gently, and with respect. Or as we sing in the end, that truth which is kind and true and needed. And yet how that telling of the truth and bringing truth back into it can be a real gift, an act of service. So as I said, the gifts can also go beyond our family and friends and out into the community, and how they stood by each other and how the Sikhs are standing by the Muslims. So as you stand by someone in the framework and from the space of equality and oneness, we call that being an ally. And so we see allies in all kinds of different places. We see straight people who stand by gay people so that they can have equal rights and experience life openly and freely. We see the Gentile who protected and stood by the Jew and still does. We saw men who supported women in gaining suffrage and men who stand by women today for equality. We see white or Caucasian people who explore their own issues and stand by people of color in situations where they might not be treated equally. And we stand for that oneness and that equality among all people. So whatever it is, however it is you're feeling called to express Seva, I encourage you to think about it at this time of year and how you might bring Seva as part of the gifts. One of the key principles that we talk about here, we talk about it is a service or a type of Seva. We talk about tithing our time, talent, and treasure. And if you think about it, when you tithe your time, when you're giving of your time, whether it's in prayer or listening or being available, that's being of service. When you tithe your talents, the ways that we have, the skills that we have, and we share them with others, or when we are meeting those opportunities like Charles Fillmore talked about and using our talents and our skills to make sure that there's a way that people are served, when we're standing by people in oneness and with love, that's sharing our gifts of talent. And then, of course, the gifts of treasure, money or things, when we give food and shelter and water from that place of love and oneness, the reception of that is so different than, oh, you poor thing, let me help you. So think about it. The intention behind Seva shifts how that gift is received. Another Sikh quote from Guru Nanak: if people use the wealth bestowed on them by God for themselves alone or for treasuring it, it is like a corpse. But if they decide to share it with others, it becomes sacred food. Yeah, I thought that was nice. So we might not have turbans that set us aside from others, and that's not why the Sikhs wear the turbans either. They have a reason behind that, and that's more of the history. But when we go out there, people aren't going to know that we're actually religious Zionists being of service, and that's okay. But if somebody sees what you have and wants to know why you have this, it's okay to say that you are part of a New Thought tradition that's expressing ancient teachings found all over the world that express themselves through traditions such as Seva as practiced by the Sikhs. Yogi Bhajan, also known as Harbhajan Singh Khalsa Yogi Ji, became a U.S. citizen in 1976, and his bottom line was, understand the fact that God is in all, big and small. And his motto was, if you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all. If you can't see God in all, you can't see God at all. So I encourage you to give the gift of Seva at this time of year and all year, and see God in all, and let all see the God, that light in you. Satnam. And so it is.